we were chatting earlier and just thought, because of the shooting, that we would reflect just on what happened, on our views on this politically and as Christians, because this thing kind of mixes together.
Yeah, it does. Faith, politics.
Our kind of American identity.
Yeah.
And so we thought we would just come on. We haven't rehearsed. We have no talking points. We
haven't talked about it at all,
Yeah, we
actually.
would just kind of...
In a nightclub in Orlando, which is my hometown, there was a mass shooting. It was the largest mass shooting in U.S. history, and it occurred at a nightclub called Pulse, which is a predominantly gay nightclub, although I have many straight friends who go to that nightclub.
So you knew of the nightclub?
I do know of that nightclub, yes. And, you know, we're not quite sure yet what motives were, but it was a massive, massive tragedy for Orlando and for the United States at large.
Yeah. And it brings up some perplexing questions because, I mean, the biggest issue is just the pure tragedy for these families and loved ones. I mean, this is the largest mass shooting in American history today, and I think we're all still in shock. I mean, the magnitude. I just can't imagine what it must be like for you. It's a hometown, so to me, Orlando, I think I've been there once, but for you, your whole city is being rocked, and the whole nation is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I've been watching all day just to make sure that, you know, no one I knew was there, you know, watching the list of the victims come out and those that lost their lives, and just checking against, you know, because, I mean, having grown up there, I still know plenty of people that live there.
Absolutely.
Certainly have friends that go to that nightclub from time to time.
Yeah.
So.
And so, I mean, maybe the place to start would be the Mateen was the last name of the subject, as they call him, that shot these people. Made a phone call to made a 911 call and claimed allegiance to ISIS before, and I think even during the shooting, if I heard correctly. And what's interesting and what the experts are trying to decipher right now is whether this was a call of, you know, an opportunistic versus ideological killing.
Right.
Meaning the San Bernardino shootings, or certainly 9/11 is a better example, that is an ideological killing. They planned it. They had bought into Al-Qaeda. They were affiliated with Osama bin Laden. They went and drove those planes into the places they did because of an ideology where they're not sure whether this guy was just kind of like, well, I'll make a phone call just to claim allegiance to ISIS. They're not seeing so far
there was an actual connection back.
An actual connection
back. An organizational connection.
An organizational connection. He clearly has homophobic problems. He made a comment to his father, I think a few weeks earlier or days earlier, when he saw two men kissing.
Right.
He was very bothered, and his father was on NBC saying, wow, I never realized he had such an aversion to same-sex love.
And his father was saying this is not our religion. His father was denouncing, you know, his father's a Muslim.
Right.
He was denouncing this is not being a part of the Muslim religion, which if you've studied the Muslim religion at all, you know that this, you know, in its pure form is not,
right.
You know, it's not according to the Quran to behave this way.
It's not, and the parallels between Islam and Judeo-Christian ethics are pretty similar, based on Sodom and Gomorrah. And in the Quran, there's frequent mention of Lot and the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so you have a parallel there. I think Christianity is further down the road, believe it or not, than Islam is with respect to accepting people.
I would agree.
But this is complex because we don't know whether the ultimate motivation was, you know, we're going to kill Americans, we're going to kill gay Americans.
Right.
And that's where this one's so complex.
It is, and we may not know that for some time.
Yeah.
Although certainly the comments from his father would, you know, sort of lead in that direction.
Yeah, and he was born in the United States of America, and we can't get into these conversations without talking about Donald Trump, who tweeted recently, I called for the ban. Well, Trump, if you would have been president for the last 20 years, it wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
Even if you had 4 terms, this was an American, born here, raised here. He was not So the ban wouldn't have worked.
Well, I felt his tweets today were really tone deaf and really insensitive too. I mean, I know that he did tweet, his condolences, but then very quickly, like, it was sort of smug, like, I called it. I mean, that's not the time to say,
Right.
I called it. See, like I knew it.
Yeah.
But there will always be Americans of different religions, and some of those people will belong to religions and do horrible things. We've had Christians do horrible things. We've had Muslims do horrible things.
Yeah.
And so, the idea that this, it seems like he's being opportunistic with a tragedy and pouncing on it as a way to sort of promote his agenda of xenophobia.
I think so, and he knows that there are millions that can't identify the difference between Muslims and
Right.
ISIS members.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
What is the difference between Muslims
Well-
and ISIS members?
Well, if it was true that all Muslims want to kill Americans,
Right.
there are millions of Muslims that live here right now.
Right.
So if all Muslims
Right.
want to kill Americans, we would be hearing about shootings every single day.
I mean, is there a comparison that could be made between, us as Christians and an extremist Christian group that we don't identify with at all? It's the fact that all Muslims, are umbrella sort of under this suspicion of being ISIS members is insane.
It's insane. And
It's like assuming that I'm part of Westboro Baptist
Yeah.
and that ideology because I'm a Christian.
Yeah, or in the 1960s, you're a Christian KKK member. Well, therefore,
Right.
all Christians are KKK
Right.
members, and
Yeah.
Trump preys on ignorant people.
That's correct.
That just don't
Yeah.
understand the difference.
Ignorant
and there
and
are
scared.
so many, and scared.
Yeah.
But I think mostly ignorant.
Yeah.
If all we have Muslims right now in our armed forces fighting against ISIS. We have Muslims that fought in Afghanistan, in Iraq.
Yeah.
That died in World War II,
Yeah.
in Vietnam, in the Korean War.
Yeah.
And so if all Muslims were against America,
It's really disrespectful.
and most Muslims, most ISIS members are killing other Muslims.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
but yet Trump politicizes this and leverages it, and he's got tens of thousands of people saying, "Right on, we got to get rid of these guys."
Yeah. Well, we can't really have this conversation without talking about gun control
Okay.
a little bit, and we've not talked about this on air or whatever, but we've also literally not talked about it
Yeah.
interpersonally.
Yeah.
I mean, does this kind of an event shape your views on gun control? Does it make you feel differently?
This one does,
Really?
because this guy was he was investigated twice by the FBI.
Right.
He purchased these guns within the last few weeks.
And they are guns, semi-automatics.
Semi-automatics.
That are literally created for mass bloodshed.
Yeah, there's semi-automatic. I mean, I'm a Republican. Semi-automatic guns should not be sold in this country. They're
Oh,
just
okay.
No,
I didn't know you thought that.
No, absolutely. And this is proof as to why.
But I really want this to sink in, what you just said. He's been under investigation by the FBI twice, and he legally purchased a semi-automatic weapon this month.
Yeah, and
It's insane.
Yeah, and the FBI said, well, he was cleared. But this is the tricky thing. I mean, there is no way to know. But you would think that the really smart people would say, even if you are under investigation. But then it gets into profiling. So here's a guy that was under investigation. He's been cleared. On what legal basis would he not be able to have the same right as a white guy in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever?
And that's where it comes back to then no one should have the legal right to buy a semi-automatic. I mean, how would last night have looked differently if he didn't have that gun?
Right.
Like, really, I mean, I don't know that much about guns, but it would have looked quite different if
Yeah.
he was reliant on legal guns, right?
Yeah, but the thorny problem is there are 1 billion firearms, and the
Sure.
counter argument is going to be he could have bought a fully automatic gun on the black market.
Correct. Sure. But do we need to enable it more?
No,
I
it's
mean,
a great point, and
Yeah.
I think that people will be talking more about gun control. But the issue now, I was talking to a friend earlier. It almost feels like with these mass shootings, you had UCLA last week. We
Yeah.
had the church in South Carolina a little while ago. We had Paris. We had Belgium. I mean, it just seems to be. I remember after 9/11, George Bush and the whole administration saying that we just have to get used to the fact that terrorism is going to become more commonplace.
It's so scary. And speaking of commonplace, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but your daughter was at UCLA.
Yeah, she was, and they were scared. And because of terrorism, because of social media, Twitter, texting.
Yeah.
She was in a library where she works on the ground in a room with 20 people, lights out, and
That's
they didn't.
terrifying.
Oh yeah, she was
Terrifying.
absolutely horrified, and people didn't know, and so there were
Yeah.
sounds. They thought the shooters were near her,
Oh,
but it's
gosh.
becoming more and more.
Yeah.
And in that case, it wasn't a terrorist attack, but they thought it was.
And it's like my children are growing up in a school where they have drills for this.
Yeah.
For this. It's really scary.
So.
Well, one last thing I want to talk about, and we did talk about this briefly before, but I had mentioned on Facebook that I was feeling really disappointed and dismayed by the fact that I noticed a lot less online support for Orlando than I saw for Paris or for Brussels, where immediately my Christian friend, all my friends, Christians, non-Christians alike, I remember going on Facebook shortly after the Paris shootings, and it was just a string of profile pictures that were, red, white, and blue. Really quick. And I did not see that same kind of, unconditional support of Orlando today. I really didn't. And the people in my feed as I was going down, the people who were vocal were my LGBT friends, my more progressive friends, some Christian friends, some conservative Christian friends. So I don't want to get into the argument. It was no one.
Yeah.
But there was a definite silence
Yeah.
from more people than there were with Paris, with
Yeah.
Brussels.
Yeah. I hate to agree with you on this one, but I think you're right. And the reason I hate to agree is because I don't want it to be the case, but I think that it is the case. Having said that, I did read, I think it might have been your thread, and there were many evangelical Christians saying, "What are you talking about? At our church today, we prayed." So
Yeah.
I don't think we want to go as far as to say
No.
evangelical churches just said, "Oh well, it's a bunch of gays that got shot. Who
I
cares?"
don't either. And I went to an evangelical church this morning and we prayed.
Yeah.
So I will say, I
Yeah.
mean, it goes back to that, like, not all Christians. I'm not saying all Christians,
Yeah.
but I am saying I did notice a pattern.
Yeah.
And I didn't see as much support. And when I posted that, I don't think it's just me because so many people shared that status update that I put. So and I saw gay Christians saying the silence is deafening.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think before I read your post, I was scrolling on Instagram, and I remember after Paris, I mean, it seemed like every other.
It was all anybody was talking about.
Yeah, and they were putting the flags, and they were changing their
Yes.
things, and there is definitely a mysterious,
Is it mysterious?
paradoxical.
What is it? Let's name it.
Well, I think I actually shared something that a friend of mine, Pete Gregg in England, posted, and it was similar to your sentiment. It was a little bit shorter, but the same spirit, which is, we know as a fact, had this happened on a Sunday morning in an evangelical Christian church, the airplanes would have stopped flying,
Yeah.
in this country. Or, so to speak, I think there would have been I really do believe that there would have been much more of an uproar. And
Yeah.
just by going through my Instagram feed, I'm surprised to see how silent. I mean, I don't think anybody's not shocked, but
sad.
it doesn't seem
But
to
do
be
you
the
think,
same.
I suspect that there are Christians who think that support, like expressing support, feels like they are condoning that there were gay people at a nightclub together.
I would agree. I mean, I have no doubt about that. Either implicitly, I mean, I know some older Christians, evangelical, that older generation, that would definitely think, well, God,
Right.
blah, 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 Sodom and Gomorrah or whatever.
Well, and what's interesting is when I brought this up, I feel like the reaction I got was similar to the reaction that I get when I talk about racism, which was a lot of people going like, "That's not a thing. That's not a thing. It's, we were all at church," or "That's not a thing. I just want to get the facts straight." There was just a lot of like excuses instead of just an acknowledgement of like, you're right.
Yeah.
We posted that flag of France within an hour, but with Orlando, we're just waiting to hear the facts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this was profiling.
Yeah.
People were profiled because
Yeah.
of their sexual orientation,
Yeah.
and they were slaughtered like pigs because of
So
their
sad.
sexual orientation. And
Yeah.
there does seem to be a sense of, where's the outrage amongst Christians, and why should it matter as a Christian whether they're LGBT or whether they're Christians worshiping in a Christian church? These people were profiled.
Yeah,
It is the sickest, most heinous form of.
it is.
unimaginable what happened.
It is.
It is the greatest
Yeah.
mass murder in the history of our country.